And I think it started. Thank you to everyone for coming back. um, um, I am, let's see, it is 9:05. And, oh, I'm sorry. Did someone say something? It's 9:05, and so we are going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Dr. Thomas, if you would conduct our roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis?
Here, barely.
We're glad you're here. Nice hairdo. I like
I know, I like it.
Right out of the-
Nice.
it. Backside.
Out of the shower and yeah.
Gallagher?
Here. Hey, y'all.
Okay.
Hey.
Miss Davis?
Here.
Dr. Yeager?
Here.
Dr. Dykeman?
Here.
Dr. Anderson? Dr. Gant?
Here.
Attorney Hull?
Here.
Dr. Maddox?
Here.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we do have a quorum. We'll move forward with item number 2, which is to amend and or adopt the agenda. The floor is open.
I move that we adopt the agenda as provided.
Second.
All right, there was a motion by Ms. Davis, and a second by Dr. Maddox. Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any discussion? Okay, Dr. Thomas, if you would take roll for all in favor of adopting the agenda before us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Dr. Dykeman?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Gant?
Yes.
Attorney Hull?
Yes.
Dr. Maddox?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that motion carries, which means the agenda that we have before us will be the one that we are following. I am going to turn the floor over. I do thank everyone for coming back. I know this is early, and when we think about these trainings, it's a great idea until like the Saturday of, and sometimes we're like, oh goodness. But we have already had some wonderful discussions. And I think all of us are looking forward to the discussions today around some pretty important topics. And so you have the agenda before you. We have team building. We're going to be discussing committees and school safety. And then also lastly, recognizing community members. But I'm actually going to turn the floor over to Dr. Maddox, who will be giving us any additional comments and a recap, as well as facilitating our team building activity for this morning. Dr. Maddox. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Maddox.
I do that all the time. Seems like I would be better at that by now. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm a morning person. So last night I was shutting down on y'all, but this is my time of the day. So, last night, we had a fruitful dialogue, including the Big 5 personality, the overview, and also a lively feedback and discussion regarding our strategic plan. A decision to, we finalized a decision for how we move forward with gathering data and our survey that's coming up. And here we are back early this morning, another day. I'm ready to learn, I'm ready to listen, and I'm ready to laugh. I just want to have a good day today. I'm very excited. As we're in this new year, there's a lot going on due to COVID. But I do believe, through our ongoing healthy discussions and communications, we are on the right track. I'm better starting out than with the way that I ended last year, and I'm very, very excited about that. Last night, Dr. Gant led an exercise about the Big 5 personality, which, I believe was an excellent way to encourage us to continue to utilize and reflect on our strengths, but also challenge us to look at the areas in which we need to grow individually so that we can be a better asset to the board and collectively as a group. And it seemed last night that we had more similarities than we had differences, which is very refreshing. And so today I just want to move forward with that kind of discussion. I actually facilitated a meeting at work a few weeks ago, and I did a Myers-Briggs, and I thought, yeah, I'll do that, but I'm not going to do that. I think what Dr. Gant led last night, was perfect. It's on the same line. But what I do believe is that, there's never enough opportunity for us to truly, get to know each other. And so I posted some questions in the chat. And so I'm going to give us a minute, and I'm going to play a little bit of a song, that I think ties in with, with us as a district, with us as board members, just as our work in its entirety. And that it's for 1 minute. And so when that ends, I need everybody to kind of come back. And so I just want you to look kind of at the questions, and basically each person, I just want you to introduce yourself and choose 2 of those questions to kind of share out. And I'm asking each person to stay under 3 minutes, and then we will be way under our time limit. We'll give about a minute left under time. So is that okay with everybody? I'm gonna need some feedback. I told you about my personality. My heart is going boom, 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 boom. I need to hear
That sounds wonderful.
Yes.
Sounds really
Thank you.
exciting.
Okay.
I love your
Okay.
energy this morning. So,
Okay, thank you. So let's get ready to get started. Am I able to share my screen, Lisa? Okay. So
Yes.
please go ahead and look at those questions. And I'm gonna start the music.
I don't hear the music.
Okay, did everyone have opportunity to look at that? Okay, so what we're gonna do next is, so that we have full participation, is I'm just gonna spin the wheel, okay? And when your name comes up, please go ahead and share, introduce yourself, anything you want to share about yourself. Tell us, where you are today, whether it's you want to talk about today or whether you want to talk about this week. We just want to know, where you are, your current state of mind this morning. And then go ahead and go into your 2 questions. So we're gonna go ahead and spin the wheel. It's got a little reggae, so I want to see a little shoulder action as we spin the wheel and get to the first name. Okay,
Oh, I'm the winner.
Miss Kara.
So that may, oh wait, now it's on Linda. So is it not really?
Oh no, go ahead, Miss Kara.
Okay.
Y'all took your name is removed once I call your name. Your name gets
I
removed.
see. Okay. So that makes me very nervous. That whole thing of not knowing when I'm going to be called on makes me very nervous. When I was when I was in school, so my maiden name is Abad, which is A-B-A-D. And so I was always first all the time. But that was good because I knew exactly when I was going to be called on, and I knew like when they did attendance that I had to be ready right away to say I was here. So also when Dr. Thomas sometimes goes out of order with the roll call, it makes me all like flustered because I don't know what my name is. So I'm with you on that like speaking. So I only really had a chance to think about one of the questions, and it was the first one, which is the thing that keeps you up at night regarding the school district. And I think that it's not even just our school district, but I wonder just a lot in terms of education, of if we're doing the right thing for children in terms of education in general. And when we were talking about the goals last night and we were talking about the milestones, I just sort of got all in my head about testing in general and whether, and I know a lot of people feel this way, and I don't know that there are a lot of people who think that these kinds of standardized testing tests are awesome. But I just feel like, and Tish brought it up too, like, okay, well, we want children to read. Of course we want children to be able to read, but we're gonna test them to see if they can read. And like, can't we just see if they can read? Like, can't we just ask them to read to us, or like ask their teachers? I feel like their teachers must know whether or not the kids can read. And when we test them on standardized tests and then say, oh, you're not on grade level, like, is that really testing whether they're on grade level? Is their score on this test really reflective of whether they are on grade level? And then it started to make me think, and that's why I asked that question last night, like, what does on grade level mean? Like, who determined what's on grade level? And is that actually appropriate to what somebody who's like in third grade really needs to be able to do or should be able to do? And especially because developmentally, you know, reading is one of those things that some people get it really early, and some people, it takes them longer till, you know, second grade, third grade. But then eventually they're able to catch up and read well. But we are, if you're testing somebody in third grade and they really only just kind of got it, they're probably not going to be on grade level in third grade at the testing point, but maybe are going to be fine anyway. And of course, I think we need to find out and make sure that nobody's slipping through the cracks, but I just like the whole testing thing is something that keeps me up at night, I guess I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's see.
Did you move the chat box?
All right, Nicole.
All right. So the first thing I'll talk about is kind of my platform. So for those that don't know, we have 3 boys, 1 high school, 1 middle school, 1 in pre-K. And throughout our just time as being a parent and an attorney that practices in that field, I've seen things that kind of made me feel uncomfortable. And I've had a lot of parents come to me to talk about experiences in the district. And while I love what I do, I don't feel like parents should have to hire an attorney to make sure that their kids are getting the education that they're entitled to. And so on my platform, or what I want to bring to the board, is making sure that the areas that have gone unnoticed, the problems that I continuously see, whether it be in consultations or just through my experience as a parent in the district, I want us to alleviate those things. I would rather work myself out of a special education job and just let people come to me for divorces and stuff like that. So that's what I'm hoping to bring. I want us to be a stronger district. I guess to my second part, I don't know if I have a healthy fear, but I am very empathetic. And I've been a part of very marginalized groups. So I know what it's like to feel like your voice is unheard and you're being very unseen. And so if I have an opportunity to bring some light and give a voice to those groups to make sure that all of our kids are able to succeed to the best of their ability, then that is what I want to do. That is what I want to bring. And that's kind of what I try to keep in front of me as we go through these decisions and we just learn more about our role for the board.
Excellent. Okay. Well, my state of mind this morning is calm. I've been stressed the last few months, but I've really worked on calming myself down, relaxing more, and I've actually been feeling better. And I think I've been looking better because people keep telling me, because I'm like, oh my God, what was I looking like? So I think I'm calm this morning. I'm excited. I'm open, which I didn't leave open last year, but I'm open, and so I'm excited about this new year on the board. The main thing, I'm a lot like Kara in terms of the discussion about testing and reading. Being that I have worked with so many students in this district and their parents, I see even now that I get nervous when we don't meet students, and even when it comes to testing them. I mean, not even testing them, but in terms of highlighting how far they have improved. Because like I had a child last year that was in the 4th grade at 1st grade level, but by the end of summer, he had moved up to high 2nd grade level. And and I'm still working with him, so he's steadily moving up. But if he were to be tested, it would be seen as though he hadn't really made progress, because it would say that he's not on grade level. So I struggle with that when some of our students, it's going to take them a little longer, which is why I did appreciate like moving from 100% to 80% and that goal for that reason, because it's not that they're not that the faculty and staff are not working with our students, but the fact that some of the students, they are going to need the extra attention, and so they are moving up, but it may not be reflected in the way in a test. So that's the thing, and that's what concerns me. That's what keeps me up at night. I don't know. I love children. I just happen to be in a family that does, and so I see when they're making progress, and I just want to find better ways to acknowledge the progress of all students, from where as they advance, So that's my spiel on that. All right, let's who's next. Miss Linda. You're on mute. You're on mute.
You missed my whole introduction. Let me have to do it over again.
Do it over. You have to start over. You have to start over.
I was going to trade with whoever went last, but okay, I'm back. And so I'll go ahead. Now, I came on the board. Actually, I came on the board at the request of community members who wanted to make sure that we would continue the work of helping to work on human relations in Athens, Clarke County, and also equity. So equity has always been one of the things that drives me. And I, prior to coming on the board, of course, I spent a lot of time in our schools, not like a lot of you have, but just enough because it was situational. And what I saw were things that I felt from a corporate lens could be fixed. And I feel strongly that we needed measurements that actually tell the story of what's happening in the schools. I felt like we needed transparency in terms of actually knowing what's happened in the schools and what's happening in our schools so that we could effectively evaluate and make some changes there. I know that I came on the board because we needed to change how we are doing education, period, especially in Clarke County, because the disparity was just too glaring. I'm still concerned about that 100% number not being there, because again, I hear you in what you said, and thank you, Tawana, you gave me some insight on that. I recognize that there is progress that can be made, but I don't want us to spend our energy trying to meet numbers. I want us to spend our energy trying to help kids or teach kids and help them become the best person that they can be. And I really need for us to have some measurements around that work, right? Because I believe if we do those things, the other part will happen. But I also need for us to be able to see kids that are being ignored. I've mentored too many children in this district who I know are not being taught, right? And I know that they are labeled a certain way. And once you get that label, it's really hard to receive the education that we think we're paying for. So my question to the superintendent at the time that I came on the board was, what does it cost to educate all of the children in Clark County? And people want to tell me, take the budget and divide it by the number of children. That is what we pay to educate the children in Clark County. And we see how we have failed so many times in so many ways, and the majority of our students. And so that is not the cost to educate the children. I don't think we know the cost to educate all of the children in this county. And so my single mission is to educate all of the children in Clark County, each to its best potential, each to what they can possibly do toward creating a life for themselves, and recognizing that they will sometimes, and the majority of them, just like me, will graduate with no idea of what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. But we need to have the skills to be able to do some things. And so I am the testimony for that. I definitely went to the phone company to be a part-time operator and had no idea what that was about. I just knew that some of my friends got in, and I went and got a job too, so I could get a paycheck, and turned it into a fantastic career because I had the skills to know how to do that. And again, I didn't get my skills all from Clark County, so let's be really clear. I got those from my family and also from my church and people around me who kept encouraging me, who took every opportunity to teach me something. And so I know that it takes a strong community and a strong support system to be able to actually get our kids to where they want to be. They need to be exposed to different things. And so education becomes a bigger deal for me. My healthy fear, and I don't know that I have a healthy fear. I have worked all my life to get rid of the fear that I carry. The fear of just being Black in America is the healthiest fear that I guess I could have, because I actually know how things work now. But my fear is that this board, and I'm praying that this board will bring to our district a willingness to actually do the work for our children. And we really have to guard against so many influences that would cause us to behave differently. I don't have a healthy fear. I have an unhealthy fear. And my unhealthy fear is that I will spend any more time, and I promise I will not do this, in the hell that I've been through in the last year. We are not going to do that anymore. And so my prayer is that we will actually learn our work and learn what our work is, that we will give the superintendent the space and the respect that she deserves to actually be able to run this district. I pray that we will not succumb to the outside pressures to lean in a direction that is more advantageous to anybody other than the district. If we can't put our children first, our resources first, and our responsibilities first, then I think we will continue to be a dysfunctional board. So I think I've said enough. But I love all y'all, so happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Linda. Okay, we have about 12 minutes left, and if each person take 2 minutes, we'll make it in time. I know we really, I know Dr. Gann is serious about that time, y'all. We have a great agenda today. No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm supposed to be the timekeeper, so we're fine. Go ahead. Let me see who's next. All right, Tish.
I think is it me? Okay.
That was Dr. Tom.
I see Dr.
I can't see. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I looked at it after it was
I can't hear.
I'm sorry. Let me
Is
give
she
you the
talking?
right introduction. All right, Dr. Thomas, it's your turn.
Okay, stop yourself. Okay. I saw Dr. Yeager lean and make the wheel. I'm like, I felt like we were on Price is Right. And it was right there. I'm like, it was on Dr. Yeager. And then the next thing I knew, I was like, okay,
Move
she's
back to you.
cheating over there. The thing that keeps me up at night is the learning needs of all of our children, particularly those children, our marginalized populations whose academic needs are not being met and who have not had access to some of the supports that other children might have had. So I struggle every day with the disproportionality that exists within our district. I struggle with any child who is not on grade level. But I also struggle with those kids who are on grade level who I know aren't being pushed to maximize their potential.
Right.
So I worry about both ends. I worry about our children being challenged. I worry about the responsiveness of our instruction to the needs of our lowest performing to our highest performing students. And, yes, there's a special place in my heart for those children who I know are so far behind, and trying to understand and follow our commitment to making sure they have what they need in every classroom, consistently, and that we have teachers who are committed to that work. Okay, I have 2 minutes. So that's what keeps me up at night. A healthy fear probably would be just making sure that we're doing it right. And I don't even know if it's healthy. It's so hard to know what right is.
Yeah.
And we do hear so many voices. And I say it all the time, I don't feel that our loudest are our largest. And I want to make sure that we are a voice to those voiceless populations that we serve in Athens, Clarke County, but just wanting to get it right. And knowing that, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do that's going to be the best thing for 100% of the people.
That's right.
And that's hard. When we
It
talk
is.
about the 80% in achievement, just even with any decision we make, is it in the best interest of everybody?
That's right.
And it's hard to ever do something that, it may be best for kids and it's not best for adults. It may be best for half the children and not best for the other half. And so that's I think healthy fear. It's a fear. I don't know how healthy it is, Dr.
Yeah.
Maddox, but there I am.
That was excellent.
Guess I need to turn on my volume.
Okay, Miss Karina.
Lord, I knew it was gonna come on me.
Eventually.
Okay, let me stand to the side so I don't hold up the line. Okay, so I
You went on mute, Karina.
hold on. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm learning how to use my earphones, y'all. Okay, so I have 2 children in the system, one in middle school and one in high school. And my personal experience with having to almost literally carve my way into being engaged in the schools has not been the best experience. And I don't think any parent should have to do that. So one thing that I had to take some notes, y'all, because my brain be going all over the place. One thing that I would really like to see us do is remember that we are not the first educators. Parents are the first educators. And at the end of every day, we send kids home. And if we're sending them home to environments or parents where they don't have the information that we are giving to their children, we're going to have to start over every day, every year with trying to figure out why our students are behind. So before we even get to the students, I think we need to do a better job of reaching parents and making sure that they understand how to navigate the system. I spent a lot of my personal time helping parents figure out how to navigate the system, how to write letters, how to what words to use, reminding them don't show up to the school only when something
That's right.
is negative. But that's a lot of work, and it is work that should not be put on just a few individuals in the community. We should have a community-wide understanding about what the relationship looks like between the community and the system, and then what education looks like, and how we get all of our children to the point where we're all succeeding while in school and post-high school. And really quick, the last thing I want to say is if we can move away from this ideal that parents don't want to be involved, I think that would help a lot, because we also have to remember that parents were in elementary, middle, and high school too, and their experience might not have been the best. And I can say from personal experience, my experience in Clark County School District was not the best. But it was motivation for me to get involved when my kids got in, so that they didn't have the same exact experience that I did. But everybody doesn't have that. So we need to remember that parents have experiences too, and their experience with the school system may not have been the best. And so they're doing what they can. If the kids are up and they're at school, they've done a good job. So we need to start celebrating people who are the first educators. And the school system is not the only institution of education. We need to look more at the community and building better partnerships and recognizing that children learn everywhere, good or bad. So, okay, I think I'm over my 2 minutes.
Thank you. All right.
I almost did it again, Greg.
Yeah, we're about to do it again.
All right, I'll try to be quick. So I guess in terms of the platform that I came on with, if I go back and read my little 5-minute or listen to my 5-minute video that I made, I was very interested in equity and giving every child what they need. And I guess I've learned in the last year and a half that that's harder to do than I thought it was. How we both define it and then how we make it a reality for these children. There's so many different kids with so many different needs. It's a hard job to meet all of their needs, even just to find out what they are. So I guess I'm a lot more, I'm less naive than I might have been a year and a half ago, having worked through what we've done in the past year and a half. In terms of my healthy fear, okay, this is laying it on the line. I have a fear of white woman disease. I see a lot of my friends, my Black friends, accusing older white women of not getting it. So I have a big fear that I'm one of those, right? So I try very hard to make sure that I'm an ally. And I try very hard to make sure I'm aware of my own privilege, and I try to understand. But call me out if I'm not doing it right. Let me know. But that's the fear that motivates me. Every time I see Dr. Gant post on Facebook about white women, I'm like, "What? Is that me?" Trying to make sure it's not. But okay, there's my healthy fear.
Thank you so much. All right, Greg.
Okay. When I got an education, I was 40, and I had left the factory floor after 15 years of being an assembly line worker for Ford Motor Company. 2 weeks later, I was in a classroom in Burke County with a group of 9th graders, teaching them economics and citizenship. And everything about me after the first couple of weeks felt like I was not reaching those kids. I mean, I was supposed to teach them macro economics, and the intricacies of different forms of government and that type of thing. And so I shifted. And what I shifted to is part of what we talked about last night in terms of financial literacy. I shifted in terms of entrepreneurship. I would bring in the barber in small rural Georgia and say, well, how did you become a barber? That type of thing. I also asked students to go to county commission meetings so that they could get a road paved or something like that. So I very quickly saw that if I didn't activate my kids, I was losing them. I mean, and when I and the teaching staff at that one county school that I really respected were coming out of what used to be called vocational. They had their kids by the hand. I used them for advice. I used them for direction so that I could better reach my kids. When I retired in 2011, I thought that I was kind of done with education, but what my focus became when I did run was career technical education, because that's what got me involved here, because this county gutted career technical education back in 2010, 2011. And I saw the damage it did to Clark Central, because that's where I was at the time. And so everything on my platform, which by the way, I just found a copy of what I ran on, everything was dealing with preparing kids for post high school, apprenticeships, special education, placement, work-based learning. All this was like really fundamental to me, because I don't think that every child has his or her own uniqueness. And I'm always career focused because I know these kids have to make a living. And I want us to pick up on what those kids are interested in, each individual kid, and say, we can take your interest and we're going to turn that into a livelihood for you. And so that's why I ran for the board.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Bobby.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the opposite of Dr. Maddox. I am not a morning person. My brain doesn't wake up until about noon. So my platform was early education and investing in early education and trying to think of ways to be more innovative in our school system with regards to early education. My background's public health, and the two things that I've taken away from public health the most is preventive measures to decrease disparities. So looking at ways to end health disparities before they begin, and also long-term investments in health disparities. So taking something in year one and then following it through year 20 to see how it worked, rather than continuing to drop things when we're not quite seeing the evidence immediately. We tend to be very, very immediate driven in this country. And sometimes you gotta wait a little while to see how something works out. So early childhood education is my platform. And just really, really quickly, I don't know how many of you guys know my background, but I'm a first generation American, and it was really, really difficult for my family and me to navigate the school system. And I was put in ESOL classes for 2nd and 3rd grade, and nobody spoke my language and I didn't speak anyone's language. So I spent about 1.5 years not speaking to anyone in school. And this was in Texas. Wow. And in the Atlanta school system, I was also just forgotten. And I saw a lot of international students be forgotten because Atlanta has a huge international population. Now I think things are getting better. I was in Clarkston, and nowadays Clarkston is hailed across the nation as, a place where immigrants can go and feel welcome, but it wasn't when I was there. So when I moved to Clark County in the 5th grade, I met some teachers who really took an interest in me because I love to read. And that was the first time in my entire life that anyone in education took an interest in me, and that was in Clark County. So I have a true positive experience in Clark County, and I know that a lot of parents don't. And I want to see more parents and students get that experience that I felt that I got. Very late, I felt like, in my education, but still right on time for me to be able to make something of myself. And then the second story is my son. My son's in high school now, and in kindergarten, our teachers put him in EIP. They tried to get us to hold him back because he wasn't reading on level. Now he reads above level and basically gets straight A's and is a great student. He's a Black boy, and a lot of Black boys are left behind in the system because we don't know how to educate them and we don't understand the things that they need in the system. And that happens oftentimes in early education. And then every year after that, they are left further and further behind. Then by the time they get to high school, we blame them for their deficiencies, and we blame them for not being able to sit still in the classroom, and we blame them for not learning and wanting to participate in a system that has all but forgotten about them from the time that they were children. So these are the things that really keep me up at night, and these are the things that made me want to join the board. In terms of my challenges, I think that my biggest challenge is going to be just trying to be as involved as I can in the community while I'm also on the board and raising small children and getting my teenager through high school. Yeah. And I really do want to be more active in the community, and I want the community to feel like I'm invested in every aspect of Clark County. So I think that that's going to be my biggest challenge. All right.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Mommy. Dr. Gann, I promise I don't have any control of this wheel.
I said a few minutes ago, I was like, Dr. Maddox programmed this wheel.
It's not rigged. I don't, but how, I mean, it could have not fallen any better. We're about at our time, so I won't belabor it, but I think this was very fruitful for me. And I mean, and as we listen, a lot of it tied right into pieces of our strategic plan. And so I just think we need to continue to find places to have these conversations and to learn more about each other. So I will gonna spin the wheel because I want you to get your cheer on, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you to move forward with your agenda as you plan. So I thank everyone for participating.
Thank you.
Come on, everybody.
Yay! Thank you, Dr. Maddox. Well, I of course, when I read through all the questions, I was trying to answer all of them in my head, but the ones that I landed on was the one that the healthy fear that drives me, but also makes me, I think, more effective. And that is the fear that a voice is being left out. And how we normally think of being heard is that, sometimes everyone won't use words to be heard. And so, when I worked in the district, sometimes people say, well, we asked them and they didn't say such and such, and they didn't say such and such. And part of that has to do with building relationships with students, with communities, so that they feel comfortable sharing with you what they think, or we build the skill to sort of understand what a person feels and thinks sometimes when they're not saying it how we think they should say it. And so that's that's like an ongoing fear that I think drives me because I know, having grown up here, and was no longer there anymore, but in Paldo, I know that my mom and my family would not be the ones, even now, like on Facebook, they wouldn't be the ones able to come to board meetings. Someone would have to find them and ask these questions, and also be sure that the risk of sharing, what our experiences were, would be minimized. And so that's like an ongoing fear of mine that I think drives my work with adults and children. And then lastly, the thing that keeps me up at night regarding the school district is also, I think, my biggest challenge. And I'm an idea person, and I'm also a doer. And so in my mind, I have 20 things that I think we can do to fill in the blank, whatever it is, And so I get so excited. If Dr. Thomas is like, well, what do you think? Oh, great. Or anybody, not just Dr. Thomas, actually. But even, when I worked in schools and in the community, and I think that's the biggest challenge. One, because I'm still learning my role as a board member. Secondly, because I can't do it all. I'm a parent who's trying to navigate education during a pandemic and just trying to do what I can. And I never know if I'm doing the right thing, but you know, as a parent, every minute you just try differently each moment. And because of that, and to also care for myself and the community. And so even if I could, you know, have these spaces, I couldn't do it all. And I think that's one of the challenges that keeps me up at night, because my brain sort of works around the clock, and I'm an idea person. So, and I'm a doer. And so this role sort of squishes you into like this, a different way of being. So that is my challenge. Dr. Maddox, thank you so much for this activity. I definitely think these are things to like keep in mind, and it's really, it feels really good to get to hear people's like lived experiences, and to know each other on a deeper level. You know, we're always in work mode, particularly in these roles. So we don't have that time. And I think the pandemic has sort of made that even more complex. So thank you so much.
I think this was an amazing activity. And just as a new board member, I need stuff like this so I can get the context of why my colleagues are responding and deciding. So this was an amazing activity. So that's my little feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, it is, I think, around 9:50-ish, and so we will move forward. I'm going to see if I can find our agenda here. So we have concluded our team building. We'll, as you see on the agenda, item number 4 is our committee discussions. And Dr. Thomas and Dr. Maddox, you may have to correct me. At some point there's a break, but okay, it's after committee discussions.
So when is the break? Oh, never mind.
So I am going to, as you see there, we have the cognitive directive as it relates to the committee discussion. And I've asked Dr. Yeager also to just do a brief review. She also sent out some information as it relates to the policy reference on committee discussion. And then really the tangibles from today is the action steps we need to take is we need to decide, what are we going to do with our committees? How are they going to be different? Are they going to be different? And then lastly, determine who is going to serve on our committees. So if you would give me a minute, you can also find this information inside of our cognitive report. It is also, it was also a part of our presentation and one of our updates. But if you recall from last night, we had a few different standards that related to board governance and leadership. And that was leadership standard 1.4, which was rated as initiating, our leadership standard 1.5, which was rated as insufficient. And then lastly, give me one second here. Okay, and then lastly, our leadership standard 1.6, and that was rated as initiating. And so if you reference that report under leadership standard 1.6, if you would look at those directives, the one that is, there are some overlapping areas, but the one that is relevant is developing written procedures to ensure that members of the board, committees, do not represent the possibility of a quorum being established. And then, of course, I mentioned this one last night is more indirectly, but ensure that we use our advisory or committee structures to effectively gather feedback to help all board members receive the same information. And so I think this really speaks to like both the purposes of the committees as well as some of the concerns that that Cognia may have had. And I can, I'm sorry, I was trying to pull up, but I don't think I have shared permissions, but I just wanted you to be able to see that. But if you could take a note, that is where you can find those directives. So again, it's under the leadership standard 1.6, and it is the directives of developing written procedures to ensure that board members and committee members do not represent a quorum. Now, the reason that we have this here is because I'm going to put this there in case you want to see it. That's the document that I'm working from. That's that's not the report, but it's the presentation that we delivered to Cognia. The brief presentation, the opening presentation. So the reason that this is here is because we still need to figure out what we need to do with our committees. This was something that was mentioned actually again during their visit. They had questions about our committees again, and we also know just in conversations with GSBA and professional development, there have been concerns that came up about our committee. So I'm going to stop my talking. Dr. Yeager, are there any quick things that you can highlight just about what policy says before we open the floor to talk about what we want to do with committees? You're on mute, Dr. Yeager.
So committees are of course mentioned in BBC. It outlines that we will have standing committees, and it gives the 5 standing committees. And then committees are mentioned in BDC and CEI because those are policies that relate to activities of the committee, 2 of the committees. But so, I mean, we can, in my view, we can reset whatever committees we want. There's nothing in, I mean, we just have to change the policy, which we can do straight away. So I don't have any big issues, or I don't think there's any big issues with policy in terms of the committees. It just outlines which ones we have and how we go about acting. So, and I shared those 3 policies with you in the document I sent out last night.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Yeager. And so you can see both what Dr. Yeager shared as well as what is stated here. I'm going to open the floor up for discussions. We do need to make a decision around how our committees, what our committees will be. I know Dr. Dykeman has also shared some ideas around having our committee structured around our strategic priorities, and others may have ideas as well. So I'm going to open the floor for us to share those ideas with the goal that we need to make a decision by the end of this discussion, not just of what committees we're going to have, but also who's going to serve on those committees. Dr. Yeager.
I was just going to say, I think committee work can be really a good way of doing things. I think we've had some issues about all of us trying to participate in committees, and that definitely got called out by Cognia. So we kind of need to trust each other and let the subcommittees or the committees do their work. And then have the full discussion during board meetings. But I also really liked how Kara reorganized us. I think my experience with both finance and property is that those things are modest amounts of work, except until something big comes up. So putting those 2 together made sense to me under her, what does she call it? Fiscal Responsibility Committee. That sounded like a really great idea. I also really liked framing the superintendent evaluation more on the human capital and all. I know we're not supposed to get involved with hiring, of course, but we can help support human resources. So I really liked how Kara reorganized us to focus on the strategic plan. I thought that was brilliant.
I'll just say why I started thinking about it this way. And it kind of comes right off of what Lakeisha was saying about having lots of ideas and wanting to do things, but not being able to do everything. And for myself, when I first got on the board, I had talked to the previous superintendent about maybe like having a committee that was focused on academic achievement and one focused on like behavior and discipline, because those seemed like areas that had a lot of data and a lot of things that were strategies going into them. But it was so hard for us to like get really into it because there was so much. And so I thought like, oh, if we had people on one committee or the other, then the smaller committees could kind of like dig in and focus on that data and be able to really look into it more without having to try to do everything. And then as I was listening to, I have it on notes here, so it must have been the last board meeting when we were talking about safety and the memorandum of understanding with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department. And then we started talking about facility needs. And then I know a lot of people have talked about teacher recruitment and retention and being interested in seeing exit interviews or just understanding the strategies that have gone into better recruitment and retention. I just know that everybody has things that everybody wants everything to go well, but I know that everybody has like individual things that they really feel strongly about learning about, and then also feeling like they can contribute to. And then when I started looking at the strategic priorities, they all kind of fell underneath those priorities that were laid out, which is great, which means that everybody is interested in the things that are the priorities. And so I just thought if we organize the committees this way, then people could feel maybe a little more invested in a few areas versus trying to learn about and understand everything, and we could share the information with each other. And so the only one I felt like still needed to be like its own thing was policy, because that one is like a work committee and didn't fit neatly under any of the strategic priorities. So that's where that came from.
So I'll share that from, and again, I'm almost like you, Kara. I don't quite sort all of the Lego blocks into particular boxes, but I do a pretty good job of organizing things in buckets. And so, because that's how I think. And so when I think about our board and trying to make sure that we're very, very intentional about staying out of the administrative realm of how we do things. And that's when I start paying attention to what our committees are trying to achieve. And so what I heard today, which was really good, is feeling invested in a few areas. And so, yeah, we can feel in, I think that may be one of the aspirations of what we want out of our committees. And I think that, again, I saw the last couple of years instances to me where the board seemed to really want to get more into telling the superintendent more about what the board wanted him to do than what our role was, which was to be the governance over those decisions made. And so I think we own the strategic plan in terms of it being our tool and the thing that we measure, evaluate the superintendent on, and evaluate the district on. And so in our hierarchy of things, as we look at how we form our committees, I would also want us to consider what is our role in those committees. Are we setting policies? Are we making sure that in those committees that the policies that we have are being adhered to, or do they need to be changed so that we can empower the superintendent to do the work, as opposed to us getting in there trying to do some of the work, which is kind of that line that we have to gently manage, because again, our great ideas don't translate to what the superintendent should be doing. It doesn't. And so that's the piece that concerns me a little bit there. What I do like about the committee structure, and again, the strategic plan comes out of what we want for the district, which should be what the work of the school district is, which is to educate the children. And so I'm not surprised at any of those parallels that we're drawing. I think that I would want to know, before we talk about who's going to serve on a committee, do we really understand the work of the committee? And if we understand the work of the committee, then I'm feeling a lot better about having more conversations about who should be on the committee. The politics enter here, and that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. And so as we look at committees and committee structures, it is a very imbalanced committee when you have your entire executive team on a committee. That creates a political imbalance. And so even before we started having challenges with the way things were going, my experience on the committee would be, I would like for our committees to be more utilitarian, I guess, in terms of ensuring that we're advancing the work in the district, right? And so it seems that there are two people that are part of the executive team with the superintendent. So those three people work together all the time. And so I have always felt that at least the vice president should probably chair the superintendent's evaluation committee, because she sees much more, or that person sees much more of the superintendent than anybody else on the board, because they have some additional responsibilities. And so there might be some designations that should happen as a result of our committees that would make more sense in terms of minimizing our efforts and our challenges at getting things done. So that's the one particular example that I think of as I look at our particular committees and what we have to do. So I think the work of the board pretty much, again, is to build policy. That's true. I think we also have the responsibility of hiring and firing the superintendent. And we have a fiduciary responsibility in terms of being accountable for all the dollars that come into this district, whether state, local, or federal, or any other way. And so those are the three things that we do. We don't have so much of a say in curriculum development and how that works. I think we have a responsibility in terms of communication with our with the community and putting that cohesiveness around it. So I really like the community development thing there. I know that our primary responsibility as a government agency is to, again, we take responsibility for education in Clark County, and we take that independently. We take that without any responsibility to anybody except the state of Georgia. And so I want us to make sure that we understand that we have autonomy here and that we need to honor that autonomy. And even as we work for people, our single focus is on educating the children here and protecting the district's assets. And so if we don't know what it is we have to protect, then I think we have some challenges there as well. So I think I have talked myself into saying that I think our committee structures, it doesn't matter what we determine to be the structures, the responsibilities and our roles should be first and foremost defined before we jump into that. And I am not at all opposed to the appointed committees. Again, the superintendent, the president of the board, the vice president of the board probably have the clearest understanding of where we are and where we need supports. And they also tend to know our strengths. And so again, how we get to having committees, I'm not feeling one way or the other about that, but I think, again, within the committee structure, leadership should be chosen from the committee, because that speaks to the personality of the committee. But how we get there, I don't have any particular preferences there. I would love to see the president have some autonomy and being able to build the strongest board that they can build. And I don't think you do that by everybody trying to exercise their independent will at saying, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, because it's not an I kind of situation. I hope it made sense. I'm gonna stop talking.
It made a lot of sense. It did.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I totally agree that I didn't mean for the people on the committees to get into the administrative stuff, and you said it in a way that I wasn't able to, but the measure and evaluate part is really important. And I thought that if people were on these different committees, then they would be able to get into the measurement and the evaluation of that area of the strategic priority, which they would then be able to share with the rest of the board. So of course, I think there are probably going to be ideas shared, but no, you're absolutely right that we're not forming committees so that we can tell the superintendent what to do in those areas.
And so it might, I'm going to say this last thing, because when we talk about measurements and priorities, I don't think that comes out of committees either. Again, I think that the board's role is to define the educational experience for the Clark County School District, right? And then the superintendent's role is to operationalize that through her administration, through her teachers, through her principals, and through her community resources as well, into how they can meet those goals. So the board sets the goals. And so if you're saying that the committee work would be to kind of identify goals or something, I'm not sure I follow that part.
No, I meant more like, so when we get to and I started really thinking about it too, sort of through the lens of the superintendent evaluation, because when we get to that point, we have to evaluate based on all of these different priorities. And in the strategic plan Dr. Thomas gave us, there's a lot of indicators and ways that we can assess whether or not goals were met and how the district is doing in these different areas. And I just thought that it's a lot of information. And if each individual board member has to go through and look at every single measure and try to understand how the district is doing on every measure under all 5 priorities, then that's really hard. And if we could divide that up so that each person is focusing on maybe 2 priorities and gathering the information and looking at the information for those priorities and then sharing them, then that would sort of divide the work of the evaluation.
I see that now. Thank you. Okay.
Can I just add that standing where I stand right now, at least for now on the policy committee, I would hope that each of those 5 committees that were all focused on individual strategic plans would have input to the policy committee to say, hey, this thing is not working. We need to fix this thing. So for example, the climate, wherever we're going to put the security discussion we're going to have next, I would assume that's in one of the committees as well, looking at that data. And they could say, hey, this is not working. We need to think about or work with the staff to change this policy. That's policy is one of our number 1 jobs. So that's where we have our influence, is by writing policy that works or that we think will work. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And so you forgive me, you guys are going to have to undo 8 years of having been here because that is not how it has worked. And so again, trying to keep the board arm's length from pretty much influencing or directing the superintendent's employees or the work. I'm not sure I understand. So help me understand that scenario again, Tish, where let's talk about safety, for example. So if we had a safety committee, what would that safety committee do? Because the safety committee doesn't have any employees either, right? And so the safety committee wouldn't be setting goals for the district, because that's the superintendent's work. And the safety committee wouldn't necessarily be going out looking for best practices. I think we run into things like that, or we do those things out of our passion, and we feed that to the superintendent. And so I'm trying to understand how the board starts to get involved in operational things and make sure that we don't do those things, and yet still have influence. And so I have understood our role to be, again, setting policy and including it as in our strategic plan as a goal or an objective of the strategic plan would be to do that. And so that definitely does not put me in a space where I am coordinating or collaborating with staff or anyone on doing that. And I want to understand how we move into that role and not then cross that line of being involved in operations, which is not our work.
Dr. Yeager, I know you're about to respond. And this isn't a complaint, it's an effort to understand from some of the directives we've received from GSBA, when that policy takes place, what is the protocol? So do policy issues begin, are they initiated at the district level and brought to the board? Or are policies initiated at the board level and brought to the district? Or is it a combination of both? Does that make sense? So if the board says we have an issue with safety and security and we want to have a policy regarding armed officers in schools, does the board initiate that, or where is that initiated? Because we've kind of gotten some mixed messaging from GSBA on that, how that directional flow works as well. And I don't know the answer, so this isn't a complaint, it's just trying to get
in my 8 years, it's a both. And in my experience here, it's a both. So if there's something that the district ran into that the board needed to change policy on, then the district brought that to the policy committee. If the board, because of whatever reason, and let's use the gun thing, if there is a strong feeling on the board that this is something that we need to look at and change in our policy, then the board takes it to the superintendent. The superintendent then takes it through its processes, and then it just simply enters from a different direction, but the ownership stays with the superintendent and administration. So it can come in from either side, but the process for getting it through and getting it back up to the board for a vote lies with the administration.
So yeah, BDC is the policy that describes the policy process. And yeah, Linda, I totally agree with you. It comes from both directions. And when I first landed on policy, it seemed like, well, I don't know what happened the year before. I know a lot of stuff happened the year before that didn't go well. But when I landed and started working with Dawn, well, and Greg was there. Greg was the chair when Greg, you were there at the beginning and was the chair. So when Dawn was doing things, it was more like, and we were working on personnel. And so personnel was coming and telling us how they wanted to change or not change the personnel policies, because it was mostly trying to match up practice, best practice with practice and what we were actually doing in personnel. And then Cognia hit, of course, and I started digging around. And at that point, Greg had his hands full. So I took over the chair and we started digging into all of these really, really, really old policies that nobody had looked at and half the staff didn't even think about. So that process has made the past year really unique, I think, in terms of a lot of staff worked through with us what these policies said and whether they were even what we were doing in the district. So I think we're in an interesting place right now in terms of the policy. We still have all the J policies to go through as a board and as the staff, and I understand Dr. Watley has spent a lot of time thinking about the J policies, many of which are included on the security discussion we have coming up next. And so those policies as they stand may not be right. I mean, some of them are 1992. There's some really, really old safety and security policies that really need to be rethought, in my mind. And, who does that work? I'm assuming Dr. Watley is going to lead that work. I certainly don't know how to write the right kind of security policy, but I am thinking that the board should take some overview of what do we want security and safety in our district to look like, and do we want guns in our schools? That's our job, right? That's our job to research the data and decide are guns a good thing or not, so I wouldn't want to just hand that over to the staff. I mean, as much as I greatly admire Dr. Watley, she's amazing, but it shouldn't just be on her shoulders. It's on our shoulders. That we can't step away from that responsibility. That's ours. As you said, we are the ones who are accountable. So.
Let me interject. I think I saw Mr. Davis.
Yes.
That way we can just be sure we get everybody's feedback.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something. This is, I know Linda and I have had this discussion for years, both publicly and privately. And she's exactly right in terms of defending, not defending, but having to define our role with the superintendent and her staff. But there's another side to that coin, which is like, we are an elected body, and not all school boards in all places are elected, and we all know that. And there's been a lot of discussion, do you have an elected board or do you not have an elected board? Do you have one appointed by the county commission? Do you I know, when Vernon first went on the board, it was appointed. And I've talked to people who were, as well as Vernon, but I've talked to people about how that board functioned. And it was more of a sounding board for the superintendent. For right or wrong, and of course I'm a strong Democrat with a small d, and so I'm all in favor of elected boards. But that puts on us a certain layer of responsibility that that in the corporate world on the boards of corporations. I don't know how they quite operate, but I don't think they have to answer, you know, to anyone in particular. And people can correct me on that, but I don't. Here we have a clear connection. So I think in terms of around the, you know, the issue of safety in our schools and what that looks like. To me, what our role is to be kind of a conduit from the community. And that's why finding out where the community is at is so important, because we are their elected representatives and we are a conduit. And with whatever we gather or whatever we you know, so it's not just researching on the internet, it's actually going out, talking to people, is actually doing town halls, it's actually leading a discussion and then giving that information to the superintendent and having a discussion. And then from that, working with the superintendent to either keep the policy as is or alter the policy. So that's how I see, you know, things operating.
And I want to say thank you, Greg, because until you came on the board, we didn't have that whole push to go out and gather community input on things of that nature in like a town hall forum kind of open environment. That wasn't a part of how we collected information. I remember Dr. Lemieux had his cabinet, his official administrative cabinet, but he also had a cabinet of community leaders that he bounced everything off of. And so it wasn't a broad brush, go out into the whole community, have a town hall and see what happens. I don't know if these issues get addressed in the PTAs, the PTOs, and now that we have LSGTs, I don't know how we're gathering information. And so to me, this is a perfect time to look at, and it will dovetail into our communications policy too. How do we get the community's input on this? And then whose job is it to collect that information? And this to me sounds like a joint thing that the board and administration could do. If you're gonna have a town hall about safety, then at least tell people who we are and what we're doing now and give them some basis to actually do that. And so I'm all for collecting information from the people who elect us and put us into office. And we do have a responsibility to uphold the laws of the state once we take that office. And the state says that, you know, we represent all of the community in Clark County. So we aren't going to be able to ever take a position on whether we are for or against the guns. We have to represent the people that are for it and the people that are against it. And so I don't see why we would put ourselves in there as being advocates for either one. Again, the work belongs and the decision belongs to the superintendent to bring back to us. And yes, we've collected our information from our constituency, but it has to be the whole constituency. So to me, that's the delicacy of politics and the challenge that we all have as board members. But the work of actually implementing policy is that of the superintendent, and whatever vehicles the superintendent chooses to do that are just that. Those are the vehicles. And if we disagree, have a conversation with the superintendent. Or if we want something different, have the conversation with the superintendent. But the board does not initiate that work, in my opinion. And as I have been taught, and as I understand the words that was said to me, let me put it that way.
Right,
I think I hear, can I just say there's a difference between implementing policy and setting policy. And I think it is our job to set policy. That's why we're here. Absolutely. And implementing policy absolutely is Dr. Thomas's job, but setting policy is our job.
And so that's to me, when we started, you know, just deleting the old policies, you know, that's foundational for who we are as a district. And so those little one-liners that say we will have community engagement, that's policy. And how we have community engagement is is the superintendent's work. If we say we will have safe, effective school, a safe school environment, that's policy. How we create that safe school environment, that's Dr. Thomas. We will have equity in education for all students, that's policy. How we create that equity, manage that equity, measure that equity, that's Dr. Thomas. And we vote up or down on, are those measurements that you define acceptable? And we had a great discussion about that 80% last night. And so if we're not satisfied that 80% meets the objective of giving equity to all of our students, then Dr. Thomas has some more work to do. And it's either change that measurement or figure out some other way to say that. But I don't feel comfortable ever signing off on something saying, okay, I recognize that 20% of the kids aren't going to be caught up in this. I'm never going to sign off on that as being equitable. Okay. I think, well, again, we need to change the way that objective is written. And so that's what I'm saying. We need to make sure that we are clear on what our role is as governors versus her role is as educating the children in this county, which is what she was hired to do.
Okay, well, let me interject here. We have not heard as much from Dr. Maddox, Dr. Anderson, Ms. Hall, and Ms. Gallagher. So any thoughts that you all want to add?
Yeah, I kind of see it as a balance. I think, you know, from my perspective, it's the board's job to hire a qualified, capable superintendent that is able to realize the mission of the board. And so I think if we do our job and we've done our job with hiring that person, then we need to give that person the space and the ability to actually execute the administration. I do think it's important for us to hear from the community, hear what some of those things are, and present those questions and give that as food for thought. But I don't want to muddy the line into we're micromanaging and telling the superintendent and the district employees what needs to be done. Because sitting back last year, I felt like that was the reason that Cognia surfaced and appeared on the board. And so I'm always very interested to hear what Dr. Thomas has to say about some of our discussions, because I want us to be very helpful in giving her information and not let it feel like we're micromanaging her decisions. Because I think if we have to micromanage our superintendent, then we didn't do a job in selecting one we felt competent and capable of executing for our district.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Gallagher, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Maddox.
I think I just want to stay quiet right now. I don't really want to say anything.
Okay. Right. Any others? Well, I'll share really quickly in case others are sort of thinking through what to say. I have a few thoughts. One is I do think that there are some policy implications regardless of how we move forward with determining the structure or who's on our committees. Like just taking another look. And so Dr. Yeager, I don't know, depending on what policy looks like, but I don't know if this is that committee's work, your committee's work with looking at how we discuss like the advisory committees. But then also like there's one point where it talks about the special committee and it says like the board can, I guess, create a special committee, but then the chair will decide who's on the ad hoc committee. So just some clarification and cleaning up, I think a policy might be in order at some point. I also think that in our policy, we should have something about the purpose of the committees, because I think that is what guides our work. Not just that we have committees, but what is the purpose? Because that should center us. And that can serve as a measurement to be sure that committees are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like even if it's 1 or 2 lines, but why are we meeting? Why is there a committee? And then lastly, I'm going to say this at the risk of it not being popular. I think we have committees that we don't need, that are not an efficient use of our time. I don't know. I think this is probably where Mike comes in at, because I don't know if we have to have some of these committees, but like for instance, with policy, with finance and property, those tend to be, property specifically tends to be a committee that everyone, I think, should be at. And most of those, when I look back over our property meetings, at least since I've been on the board, Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis, you all may be able to have more of the institutional and historical knowledge, but it seems like it's something that there's always a quorum at anyway. And that eventually, that what's decided there, I couldn't imagine, 2 or 3 people really having the weight of making a decision that is directly related to the money that the board will be spending on property decisions and things like that. And then I also think with finance, what happens is that we end up receiving pretty much the same information in our work session. So those are my thoughts around that. And then I don't think we need 4 people on our committees. I think it easily slips over into a quorum without us even knowing it, although we're not taking action other than to share that information up to the full board. So those are my thoughts as I've thought through committees. I do also understand that finance and property actually are the committees that seem to require the least amount of time. So when it comes to efficiency, those probably aren't the ones that are sucking up, not sucking up, but that we're using an enormous amount of time going over things and then coming back to work session and going over things. But I'm just sort of thinking through efficiency and again, the purpose of the committee. If we're in committee work doing the same work that then we do in the work session, something is, in my opinion only, something is missing there, because that means in that the committee work could have just been done at the work session. So I'll stop there. Those are my thoughts.
So Greg, I don't have to always be the first one to talk, but I've been on those 2 committees for the longest. And so I have seen them operate very efficiently. And I think that they are needed because in terms of the amount of information that gets filtered to the board or sent to the board and how those reports have evolved is the work of the property and the finance committee. Now, we've not had as much engagement from the property committee as we've had in the past. So I think the COC, I think you, Dr. Yeager, have taken on a lot of that work that used to come out of the property committee where people would, and maybe it was before the COC came about, I don't know, but I do know that at one point on the board, we got very robust reports on the conditions of our schools, the things that our policies call for. We had policies that said, this is the information that needs to be shared by the board. The board was supposed to be inspecting properties every year, once a year. And so those things were arranged through the property committee, and often the property committee would represent the board in meeting the district's responsibility to go out and do those inspections or to walk through these schools and to do that work. And so there was work for the property committee to be done when the district, again, in partnership with the district to make sure that we met the letter of the law and what our policy called for us to do. So I think if we still find value in inspecting properties and at least knowing what we have in the district, it rests in this committee, and this committee has taken at least a first look at things, and it relieves the board from everybody having to go trump out to the thing. Then I think that's what it should be. I think where it can kind of get off center is if we have people in real estate on the property committee who are again serving a different master there. And so, yeah, I think that's our challenge that we have is we really do have a valid reason for a property committee. We have a policy that said we would inspect buildings. It was a great sounding board for administration to say, well, how do you think the board will respond to this? And so they knew that they didn't have the consensus of the full board, but it was a sounding board for ideas that pop up in the community. And it was easier to get 3 or 4 people together than it was to get 9 people together to ever have these sounding boards. And so for that reason, I think property committees should continue. And again, if you want to change the rules and again, be more specific on the role of that committee, let's do that. But no decisions are made in committee, only recommendations. And so that's the other thing that we need to be very careful about. So even though you have 15 people from the board sitting at a committee meeting, only 4 people can vote. And so no decision is made there. That is not where we're having our problem. Our problem comes in that you may come to a consensus on a committee, But then when you go out and recruit, it's just easy to recruit. If 4 of you are in agreement and you need that 5th person, then it's just somebody go convince that person and pull in your quid pro quo or whatever you need to do to get this through. That becomes the ugliness of committees and the power of committees. And so then let's talk about finance. We have great finance reports, but are we doing the work of the finance committee? And again, I think we have policies that say, like this audit coming up, there was supposed to be a role for the finance committee in hearing those audits directly and being participants, because we are the governing authority for the district. And so for years, we weren't able to get access to that. And so that has been hard work from even executing our policies, is getting people to do that. So we finally had broke through on saying, wait a minute, this is our work. You should be bringing this information to us. And so a lot of this is defining the roles of the committees and making sure that the committees are actually helping, because nothing is going to happen if we throw big decisions like property and finance out to this full board for participation every time. We'll simply relive our board meetings every single time. And that's just, we don't have enough meetings in a month to do that or the year to do that, nor do we have the information. And so that to me is the value of having those two committees. And I will stand up for those because yeah, I think it makes it easier for administration to move forward with an idea versus knowing where they might need to shore some things up before they bring it to the full board.
Okay, well, let me, I see Mr. Davis has his hand up, so we'll go to Mr. Davis and then we'll circle back around just to check in with Dr. Maddox, Anderson, and Gallagher. And after that, we should move forward and decide what committees we're going to continue with. And if they're going, if they're gonna have the same number, if they are, that's great. And then who is going to be on those committees? So Mr. Davis.
Thank you. When I first got on the board in 2014, Vernon was sitting right next to me, and he was chairperson of the property committee. And at every meeting, with very few exceptions, if there was something being bought or sold, he would say, they would call on, Charles would say, Mr. Payne, do we have a property report? He said, yep, nothing bought, nothing sold. And so we would, and so that made it very plain to me that the property committee, at least as he saw it, and in terms of the history of the board, from what I understand, Vernon was Mr. Property. He was a building contractor. He loved to walk in building schools, and his report would be, if he made anything, it would be, I went through this school that's being built and I really loved it. We're doing a great job, that type of thing. Now, for a little institutional history of our new board members, recently, of course, we did work out an agreement for the Prince Avenue property. That took a lot of back and forth. We had a lot of executive meetings of the property committee. Had we not, and all board members were there except Lakeisha excused herself because of ties to the Prince property. The point is that there was a lot of negotiation, and the property committee was one side of a negotiating with Piedmont College, and so it would have been, had we only had 4 people on that property committee, and they made an arrangement to bring to the board to vote on it, somebody would have said, well, could we like rent it first and see if we liked it and then have a contract to buy? Or can we lower the price? Or can we negotiate this and negotiate that? That's not where you want to have the negotiation. So I don't see, I agree with you, Lakeisha. I don't see a need for the property committee. Now, the way Linda's describing it, I've never seen that function that way. You know, we normally, Dexter Fisher is the one that will report to us about the state of the property. I know you could bring me into a school and it could be leaking piping and I probably wouldn't see it. So I'm supporting the idea of the property committee being seen more in terms of not as a standing committee.
Okay. Thank you for everyone that shared so far. I want to check back in with Drs. Maddox, Dr. Anderson, and Ms. Gallagher, just to be sure they don't have any additional things to add at this time before we make a decision on our community.
Okay, hold on, let me run back here. So I just want to say, whatever we choose to do, if we cannot have, like, I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, can we not have the same meeting like 3 times? Like we have a policy committee meeting and then we can talk at the work session. Thank you. At the work session, but not rehab those same meetings again at board meetings, because I don't want to be at board meetings 4 and 5 hours because we're re-talking about the stuff that we've already talked about, or we had a chance to have additional conversation at other meetings and we chose not to have it. So can we like just do that? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Gallagher.
Dr. Gann, I agree about the property committee because I started attending those meetings because I felt like it was too much negotiation going on without the full board, and I do believe that that's one that we all need to kind of be a part of, and maybe have ad hoc committees when it comes to looking at the property, those other things that Ms. Davis talked about, for those special types of reasons, but. In terms of purchasing, I think that it's very important that we are in those conversations because the conversation kept changing. And so it's kind of hard to keep the board abreast of that if it's changing each meeting. But, but for other things, I'm being spelled out, I think like, a committee for those specific purposes. I just want us to kind of settle on these, on these committees. I just want to support Dr. Thomas as, she needs support, not micromanaged, but I feel like there is a need for us to work together, and hopefully better together. I kind of saw things differently, not as micromanagement. So I just want us to work better together, and I would just like to hear more from her about what she feels those limitations should be. I'm trying to step back more this year and see what the superintendent is needing, and then try to follow suit. That's why I'm silent a lot of the times. But in terms of this discussion, I really want us to narrow down these committees. I think it's very important that we make that decision today, so we can move forward. And I do like what someone said about making sure. I think Ms. Davis said it, making sure that it's defined, like each committee, that is truly defined, very clearly defined what we're supposed to be doing, so the new board members also know what is expected. I mean, really all of us, but that's all.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Maddox. I'll end with Dr. Anderson. Any additional things to add before we transition, actually, and then Dr. Thomas, actually, because I think could be helpful to share your perspectives and what you need. And Dr. Anderson?
From sitting in on the last half of last year's meetings, I do agree with Ms. Gallagher that the board was not particularly efficient in their use of the committees. And so I think to move forward this year, we all need to have a really clear understanding what the policies state about what these committees' responsibilities are. And I feel like that's where the disconnect is happening. Dr. Yeager, thank you, but we keep pulling up the policies and then talking about what the committees do, and they do not align. What we're saying in this meeting does not align with what's written in these documents. So that's really, I think, our main issue. So whatever we do moving forward, if we reform committees, make new committees, or keep the committees the same, we need to review the policies that govern these committees and make sure that we're doing what the document says. And if we're not, then we need to adopt new policies for the committees. I love Kara's idea of kind of using the committees to guide the strategic plan. I'm always in support of that. And I think it's a really, really smart sort of reorganization of these committees. And I do think that with regard to finance and property, I don't really understand the background to what you all are discussing about whether or not it needs to be in front of the full board or in committee. But maybe there's a way that that could be developed in the policies to say, if it's about the purchase of buildings and it's about these really larger plans, that they could be a board level decision. But if it's about building maintenance and working with Mr. Fisher on understanding the needs of the buildings and making sure that they're maintained, then that could be a committee decision as Mr. Fisher wants. Because it was his request that this be a committee thing. So if we could just work smart and make sure that we're doing what the policies say, then I think we can avoid a lot of this back and forth that we're having about the work of the committees. And then the last thing I'll say is with regards to the philosophical discussion that's being had about the role of this board in adopting policies. I mean, I think it's very clearly stated in the policy manual that this board can adopt policies and can also bring forth amending or adopting or rescinding policies. So while I do think that Dr. Thomas should absolutely have reign on operations, I think that on some level, the reason that a board exists is to have that governing responsibility. And if we put the entire onus of that responsibility on Dr. Thomas, then I think we're doing a disservice to her. And I think we're doing a disservice to our community. And I don't think we're doing the job of a board of education. So yes, we do need to have a lot of faith in our superintendent, but we also need to make sure that we are an actual policy-driven governing board. That's all.
Okay. So I wanted to wrap up with Dr. Thomas. I am aware of our time. I see that Ms. Davis and Ms. Hall had their hands up. So I am going to actually give the time to some time to Dr. Thomas, and then Ms. Davis and Ms. Hall, if you can like put your comment in 60 seconds or less, we can move forward with making some decisions because we're running just a tad bit behind. Dr. Thomas.
Yes, ma'am. So this has been really good conversation. I won't belabor the conversation. I do think that some of our committees could be potentially dissolved, that some of the work takes place. So let's look at finance. I'm not sure when I look at, and I'm not saying to dissolve it, but like I know a lot of what happens with the finance committee is also repeated by Mr. Schooneman at board meeting. And so being able to delineate what parts of that work are things that really need to happen in the committee. I like what Dr. Anderson said with property committee. There seems to be a place where maybe there might be something that would just be a small committee work, but we need to determine when the conversation is one that will require the entire board. And if that's the case, it should be a call board meeting rather than a property committee meeting, because that takes away the redundancy. That's something I agree with what Ms. Gallagher said. It's hard to sit through the same meetings 3 times. And all of us are pretty constrained with our time and our commitments, professionally, personally, community servicely, whatever we want to call it. We're all constrained. And so to have the same meeting over and over just does not seem to be efficient. So however the board wants to combine, consolidate, dissolve, I can support and work within that. But I do think, I think Dr. Anderson just said it, we have to work smarter and take advantage of the structures we have in place and utilize our time in a way that is more efficient. With policy, you know, I agree. Policy is where the work happens. I appreciate the input and the guidance provided to our team from the board through policy. And the only thing I would say with policy is the same as with all of our work, ensuring that the policy aligns to our strategic priorities and that we're not utilizing policy as a way to respond to a particular something that just happens to come up by a particular group. Now, something may come up, you know, we may look up and there's an increase in violence by school resource officers. And yes, that's something that would require immediate action, right? But that's also aligned to our strategic priorities and it's work we're already doing. But I just want us to be cautious that we are not using policy to promote any one particular agenda that is brought to us by any one particular group. And that when we look at policy, we're looking at it objectively and holistically in a way of what's the best of all of our students and families in our school district community as a whole, and that we don't, I can't think of a good word. So I don't want to bastardize the policy process, right? Where it becomes a weapon to advocate any particular agenda that might come up by any isolated group. So at any point that we decide to move something to policy, I just ask that it be something that is evaluated from a holistic approach of what's in the best interest of all of our stakeholders. That's me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thomas. We have 60 seconds before we make a decision. All
I'm
right.
done. That helped it for me. So Ms. Davis is on.
So my question, and it's a request, as we look at these committees, I would like for us to look at the committees in terms of our current structure of a charter system, because we have not evaluated our policies or our committees given our new and our current operating environment. And so if those committees do not support the charter system that we have created in the last 5 years, then I would suggest that we look at those as we think about what it is our charter system is trying to accomplish and what are the committees that we need to be able to support our local school governance teams at these 21 schools that this board has yet to address. So we have not bridged that gap, but I would want us to make a decision with the flexibility in mind that we have to still push our current charter system through our policies to make sure that we are not in conflict there, because there's power transferred to the local school governance teams that may not be reflected in our policies.
Okay. And so what, if I may move us forward, thank you for sharing that, that request, that recommendation, Ms. Davis, and for all of the feedback. I've taken notes and tried to like pull similarities. And so I see that Dr. Dykeman actually beat me to it, which is great. Like, I think that, so what do you all think about moving forward? I'm guessing that these, okay, those are the strategic priorities. I think, Dr. Dykeman, from understanding your recommendation, it would be maintaining the committees that we have, or I feel like there's an extra one. Did I miss something?
It would be making committees around the strategic priorities.
Right,
So
but
there
they would be
5 strategic priorities and then policy, so that would make 6. But then the committees we already have would fall, what they do now would fall underneath one of those new committees. So we wouldn't be getting rid of
the committees.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I hear that there's like policy has come up in several of our comments. And so it does sound like there's some work to do just around like policy, maybe if not rewording, there's some work to do with policy and there's some work to do with behaviors, right? What we do in the committees. And so it seems that one recommendation that I think is in line with what Ms. Davis is saying, what Dr. Dykeman is saying, and maybe what everyone is saying is maintaining the current committees, but decreasing the number of individuals on that committee. Also, you know, work, Tish, I think this would be your area, but looking at just the policy on committees in general, just to be sure like they're updated, that there's clarity there. And then, and you know, rewording is necessary. So for instance, with that property committee, if there are times where it's just a call meeting and not a property meeting, if there are certain conditions, then that probably needs to be in our policy where, you know, where it could be tweaked to say that in our policy. But I think what I'm hearing is what the recommendation is right now that we're talking about is moving forward with the same committees, organizing them under our strategic priorities and having less people on the committees. And also being efficient, that's what we have control over when we're in the committees, regardless whether we have one committee or 5, how we go about doing the work, and then how we do the work when we at work session in the board meetings. So I think that's what I'm hearing is organizing our committees. Dr. Yeager? I can't hear you. You're on mute, Dr. Yeager.
I think I heard you say that we would keep the same committees. I don't think that's the proposal on the table that a few of us had advocated for. I think we are changing the committees so that each committee is focused on a piece of the strategic plan. So we would actually increase the number of committees, even though I know that sounds crazy, but we would have 6 committees. This is Kara's proposal. We had 6 committees, 5 of which are focused on the 5 components of the strategic plan, and 1 which is policy, which will receive input from all the other committees, I would think, as well as do the review, the normal review of policies with the district. So we would actually have 2 new committees, 1 focused on student achievement, 1 focused on climate and culture. Government relations would fall under community collaboration, and they would do other things besides government relations. The superintendent evaluation committee would become part of human capital and development, which could work on some other things. And then finance and property would fall together under a fiscal responsibility, which is one of our strategic priorities.
But so finance and property would still be separate committees, is that correct?
No, they would just both be handled. The finance, what we have currently assigned to finance and property committees could be handled by a single committee. And then if we want to make it so that any big property decision has to be a full board decision, we can do that, it seems to me, if that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. So if we go in this direction, I don't think 3 people need to be on committees, because I think it goes back to, I think having 6 committees, that makes me very nervous. And so in my head, I'm trying to figure out what can we trade, what can we like trade off, because 6 committees with 3 people, and I understand it maybe 2, that means we're in 2 meetings, but we still have our other obligations like our community committees that we're a part of that don't necessarily, well, some of them may require a little bit more time. But let me recognize one, that we're 5 minutes before 11 and we are running behind, but I do know that we need to decide on this, which doesn't mean it's forever, but we do need to make a decision because we need our committees to be, we need to make a decision so committees can meet. But that's just my feedback. It makes me a little bit nervous. I agree with organizing our committees under the structure of the strategic plan. But if we aren't sure, if when we get into, let's say, property or any of our committees, if it's hard for us to use those times efficiently, it makes me very concerned that we will all of a sudden figure out how to do that with more committees. Not because we're not great people, but I just think there's going to be a challenge there. Dr. Dyson, I think.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say.
Sorry, everybody's going. I'm sorry. I'll just say, I'm sorry. What Attorney Hull said, like, what do some of these committees do? And what is the purpose? I do really worry now that we're going to move into a space of operations. And in light of my anticipation of Cognia coming back, I don't want us to go more toward that. direction instead of away from that direction. Some of this I see as being work of us reporting out in work sessions, us having an effective dashboard that will help the board monitor student achievement, which is aligned to the strategic priorities. But beyond that, I'm not sure what that would look like unless we're getting into what instructional practices and strategies we have, which is clearly operational rather than governance. So I just need a little clarity on what that looks like. Like, what's the purpose of, like, I get the purpose of monitoring student achievement 100%, and we need to be there and we need to be reporting that out, but I don't really understand what the committee work would look like.
Yeah, so my, I guess when I was thinking about this, I wasn't thinking that all these committees would meet every month and that even they would all require the committee members to have a lot of meetings about these things. For me, it was thinking about using committees as a, like, for work that needs to be done. And so that's why I was thinking about them as monitoring these areas more than operating these areas. So in terms of student achievement, as I mentioned, there are lots of indicators of what student achievement should look like, and just being able to keep track of all of that information and looking at that information and monitoring how that's going. That's what I was thinking the Student Achievement Committee could do. And like I said, it doesn't have to be in a meeting, but it would be like 3 people whose focus is on student achievement. And so they could be the people that were monitoring those indicators and reporting that back. And then in terms of the other ones, like the same kind of thing, the climate and culture. So what are the indicators for climate and culture that are set by the strategic plan? And if there were 3 people or 2 people or however many people whose job it was to keep track of that, then they would be focused on that area and could monitor that and report back. It came from my issue sort of when we go to do superintendent evaluation of trying to collect all of this information and have each board member look at every single indicator and have to keep track of everything that's going on in all of these areas. And I feel like that's really difficult for us to do. And we only kind of do it at the point of student or superintendent evaluation. And I think it should be monitored on a more regular basis. So I wasn't really thinking that all of these committees would meet every month. It was more that everybody had sort of a focus area that they could continue to monitor throughout the year and then report that to the rest of the board. So not everybody had to do everything. That was the main idea.
Can I ask a quick question, Dr. Dykeman? Would that be something that superintendent evaluation, that committee could request, you know, that information? Let's just say for student achievement, like I know, well, you all would know better, I think you and Ms. Davis, but I don't think you all meet like regularly. But I'm wondering if these areas where we don't have, already don't have measures, but where I know it gets fuzzy, but for instance, we're already going to be gathering stakeholder data as we move forward. And I know that doesn't fall neatly under superintendent evaluation, but at the very least, maybe student achievement might. So would those be things that the superintendent evaluation committee could request, or that the board could even request to have as a part of the work session, even if it's like a 10 or 15 minute update on some measure of our student achievement? But I know this is time sensitive too, right? Because a lot of this is around assessments, but that's just more food for thought.
I know one time we had talked about having some type of calendar, if I remember right. I'll be honest, I've lost some stuff, but I remember having some type of information calendar or some type of calendar where we would get stuff at certain times of the year. So I think as we've been talking, that has really been in my mind, that we come up with some type of calendar where we get the information that we need, so that we're not having to meet so much, and then have time to kind of. I don't learn as fast as everybody, so I can't just get information every day and try and overload my mind. I have to really sit down and have time to go through information. And so I think having some type of calendar where Dr. Thomas know that, because she knows when, I know we're not doing testing as much, but she knows where assessments are done. She knows when certain information may have to be reported to the state anyway, or whatever. And maybe those times it can be that calendar time, it can be put on the calendar to also talk with us. So I think like making things more timely, so that we're not in information overload, because honestly, that's how I feel. So I feel like we just get a lot of information. And so I think if we utilize a calendar, that would help as well.
Yeah, we do have I think we've had one. I don't know. I know with this year, like getting everything was sort of up in the air. But I know you're right. We have had one previously where our work sessions and everything, it was sort of determine what we would be discussing and then put out to the board in case there were other things. One quick thing too is I wonder, even if this is not something that superintendent evaluation can do, I wonder if these would be opportunities for ad hoc committees, which are typically like a little bit shorter lived for specific purposes, so as we're leading up to our evaluation points, would that be something, because as our policy stands right now, I think the board can suggest or create an ad hoc committee and the president decides who's going to be on that. But leading up to, let's just say, our mid-year evaluation, 2 or 3 months before that or 2 or 3 months after that, might it be appropriate to say, hey, we need an ad hoc committee of whatever 2 people for this specific purpose, or for gathering stakeholder data, we need an ad hoc committee that's going to work on this specific thing. That gives us the room to do it as needed. Ms. Davis, I jumped in front of you. Sorry.
I think that again, as we look at trying to get us to this committee structure thing, if there are concerns about that superintendent's evaluation, we only did that twice a year. We still now, policy still says twice a year we evaluate the superintendent. And if we're talking about data overload in terms of those 2 times, I think that would be very appropriate for the superintendent's evaluation committee to take that task. If they feel like they need to take a deeper dive into that data, that would be a great work for the superintendent's evaluation committee. But I don't think we need a committee overall, because every single board member representing this community needs to know what's happening with these KPIs, and we need to understand that. So that's not committee work. That to me is general knowledge. And I think the superintendent does a great job of actually presenting that information, as you said, on a calendar basis or on a timely basis. Now, the need to validate what you're getting in the reporting of the KPIs, that's way deeper than me. And that sounds like you might want to do an audit at some point if you don't trust the data. But otherwise, it's just taking the data at its face value for the board, because we're evaluating on results. And if we say KPIs are going to be a piece of that result, then that's what we're looking at. And if we want to talk about how that KPI was built, that's a conversation with the superintendent. I don't think that's necessarily a committee. So I'm not comfortable dividing this up based on the strategic plan, that being the committees. I think our committees should be the work that the board sees in terms of how we implement educating the children in Clark County. So that part of the recommendation that you put forward, especially the one focused on community engagement kind of sort of things, that one I felt was strong. But if community engagement falls under government relations, and I don't know if it does or does not, then I think that's totally different. But okay, then that might be a committee that you may or may not want to have, again, based on how the superintendent plans to implement the goals and objectives of the strategic plan. So I'm not comfortable that we need a lot more committees, and I'm not even that uncomfortable, quite frankly, with having 4 members on a committee or 3 members on a committee. I think, again, if the committees are serving the purpose of executing our duty as elected officials for the education of the students in Clark County, those are the committees that we need. Anything above that, below that, is operational from my perspective.
Okay, so how do we move forward? We need to make a decision, because I know
I think we should have the president appoint committees, right? If we agree that these are the committees that we're going to have, I think the president should appoint committees. And how she goes about doing that, if she has people volunteer, if she has people sign up, that's entirely up to the president. But let's just go back to appointing committees.
So but I don't think we've decided which committees we need.
We haven't. we need to decide which committees we need. I do think at some point, perhaps for like the next president, that may be something that you all may want to revisit. I know, I think it is sort of standard practice, or it is common to have presidents appoint, committees, and maybe even, and that's been the case before, I think these past 3 or 4 years. Selfishly, that's not necessarily that my philosophy and how I want to use my time. But of course, if that was something later on that we wanted to discuss, like as I'm leaving for the next president, I'll be open to doing that. But we do need to decide what the committees are going to be. And we need to, and so I'm going to ask you to think about everything that everyone has said and really try to pull something. We need to put our heads together and decide something for right now. I will go back and say, Cognia had concerns that my interpretation, and Dr. Maddox and Dr. Thomas, please correct me if this was, I may be misunderstanding, that as it relates to not just efficiency, but also the number, that we have almost a quorum of the board. Easily we can have a quorum of the board with having 4 people on our committees. And so that I want us to keep that in mind as well as just the general themes of our report, which had to do with efficiency. And, just keeping in mind what has been said. I think Dr. Anderson said it, whether it's the number of committees or what we do when we're in the committees, both will need work. All right, so
I'll just say one last thing, and it's fine if we don't want to adopt this committee structure. And I've seen in the chat people saying like, oh, well, we could have these ad hoc committees when it's time for superintendent evaluation. And I guess I'm just wondering why we would only want to look at the data around superintendent evaluation time. And if we're going to form an ad hoc committee to look at data at a certain time, I guess my idea was just that we would have these standing committees so that people were monitoring this all throughout the year and not just at the time of superintendent evaluation. And then for me, it seemed like if we had these committees and they were doing this all throughout the year and reporting to other board members, then we almost wouldn't need a superintendent evaluation committee, that we would have, everybody would have all the data all throughout the year. And when it was time to do the evaluations, we would just have it and we could just do it and it wouldn't be a big thing. So that was my thought about that, but I'm fine with whatever we decide to do. But I do agree that when we have committees, they need to have a purpose so that everybody knows why we have them.
Thank you. Dr. Dykeman. Dr. Yeager?
I think Dr. Anderson had her hand up before me, but
whoops.
I'm gonna let her go first.
Dr. Anderson.
So I was looking through just kind of some of the school boards around the state and some of the even larger school boards that we have in the state. And a lot of them don't even have committees. They just form ad hoc committees when real big jobs need to be done, like policy overhauls and property decisions, et cetera. I wonder, since this board has, I wouldn't say a trust issue, I would say a very zealous personality of wanting to be involved in every aspect of the process of work that we do, that we not have committees, that we just form ad hoc committees as needed, and maybe try it out for a year and see if we prefer that method to a bunch of different committees where we then meet as a board and rediscuss. So I don't know, maybe we can just try an experiment and see how it works. And if we like it better, rather than spinning our wheels for 2 hours, because obviously everyone has a different opinion about this structure. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one. So we have increasing the committees, and then on the other end, not having any, as and then just doing an ad hoc sort of approach. Dr. Yeager, and I promise after this, we're going to take 2 minutes and we're going to make a decision. And if we have to come back and revisit it next week, the week after, at the next work session, we'll just have to do that. Okay. Dr. Yeager.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion, or at least threaten to make a motion about 4 committees, making 4 committees. One committee would be policy, because I don't think we can do away with that committee. One committee would be what I'm going to call accountability, which includes the superintendent evaluation, student achievement, climate, and culture. A third one would be the fiscal responsibility committee, which includes property and finance as they currently stand. And then 4 would be community collaboration, which would include government relations, but also allow exploration of other community collaborations. 4.
I second that emotion.
Okay. And so Tish, can you
I
put
third it.
those in the chat for us? Just so we can...
Sure, let me see if I can do that efficiently. And accountability was just the word I came up with. We could talk about something else to call it.
Ms. Palmer, as you're typing in this document, do you mind like maybe like adding it somewhere else so we can see like the change? So maybe like on a, I don't know, I'm just trying to be sure
I shared this sheet with everybody.
Okay, okay.
So I actually had a question for a discussion before we take a vote on the motion that's on the table.
I don't think we have to necessarily take a vote from what we've been able to see this past, I don't think so, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Maddox, but we will need to, well, actually.
We need to vote.
Because the policy won't be updated to support these, but go ahead, Ms. Hall.
So my very brief question is, with the Community Collaboration Committee, would that encompass the representation on the community committees? Would those representations kind of be shifted into that committee or no? Am I being clear? Because I'm looking at the Athens Area Foundation Community Oversight Committee, those things that look at community engagement, and I would want to know the relationship to the Community Collaboration Committee in terms of those things. And that will help me decide how to vote.
That's a good point.
I think those would still be separate, right? Or we need to decide what we want to do about those, but that's another different conversation.
Yeah, I think that may be a different conversation right now. I think the safest thing, my own opinion, I don't know if this is accurate, would be to keep those separate. I think some of the concerns was the efficiency of our use, our use of time as committee people. With these community committees that we're on, oftentimes we attend those individually. Right, so we're going into something that is already a structure or a group or what have you. So we don't have as much influence or, to like really impact the dynamics of those committees. So I would say keeping them the same right now. Others have any?
I think this is good conversation, and I would love for us to put a Google Doc up and let everybody collect their thoughts on these, even, regardless of whatever action we take, so that we're very clear on what we think falls under each of these particular things. And again, setting that clear direction for these communities is going to matter. I agree, we can't do that here, but that needs to happen. And if this is where you do an ad hoc committee, or maybe you and the executive committee takes on this charge of refining this so that we'll know what we're voting for.
Okay, so with that in mind and other comments, if I may then just recommend that we have these areas that Dr. Yeager has recommended, that we identify people under these areas and that we sort of sit with this. We do have a work session, but I also understand this has to overlap with policy as well, right? Before like the final changes are made, because right now our policy states that we have our, 5 standing committees. But if we could go ahead and decide who's on these committees and maybe finalize this conversation at the work session.
I'm good with that. And again, to make sure that we have looked at our charter system and see if it fits neatly under here, or if there's another thing that we need, and to make sure that we are going to be able to support ourselves as a charter system. And I just have a quick question. Do we know if we extended our deadline on our contract 1 year for charter systems, or is it 3 years that we have?
1 year.
1 year. So this year we've got to apply again to remain a charter system. Okay.
That's also if the district decides to do that, I would imagine.
That's exactly. Yeah, that's if the decision is made, the application has to happen this year.
Mhm.
Is that right?
That's correct. Then we just received that approval back from the state last week that they did grant our extension. So we
Okay.
do have 1 year now to start deciding what we want to do regarding our charter and what our focus and application will include.
And so
Okay.
again, that's a huge change that we've got to look at this year. So we're going to be meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so let's if we could go ahead, if you could put your names under a committee right now, and the understanding is that we will
Just one?
I will have a place for this on our agenda, or like we can put it on the president's report or a separate action item if that would work, to sort of finalize these conversations. In the meantime, go back and take a look at the charter. Dr. Yeager, if you don't mind, you and your role, or I don't know if you all won't meet, I don't think, but take a look at policy and any policy implications that this would mean. So yeah, if you would take some time, yeah, one committee, maybe two committees, and let's see how that.
So you want us to do that now?
Please.
Oh goodness, I can't even work on this computer. Okay, let's see.
You can tell Dr. Yeah, Ms.
You
Palmer.
did say 3 per committee or 4?
I mean, I'm of the mindset of 2, but that's one of
2.
But no, just leave it at 3 right now.
So if you would, I want to be on the fiscal responsibility.
Okay.
I'm on it right now, Linda. I can put your name there if you want.
Thank you. That would be great. And if I have to have a second one, I would choose accountability. Thank you so much, Kara.
Yep.
I'm watching you guys on my iPad, but I do all.
Should we all just do one for right now and see
I think that'd be good.
what happens?
Yeah, that'll work.
Is it on the Google Drive?
Can you put me in the community?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I have Linda, fiscal responsibility, Karina, community collaboration, Nicole, policy. I put me under accountability. Anybody else want me? Oh, Mummy's putting her under accountability. Anybody else want me to add anything?
Can you put me under policy, Kara? I think I've been
No.
asked to do that again.
Yes.
I would be under community collaboration.
Community. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Here at
6,
one
7.
time.
Dr. Maddox?
Dr. Gant?
From mute. Oh, well, never mind. Go ahead, Dr. Maddox.
Which one did you want, Dr. Gant? Do you want accountability?
You know, I am going to fill in where necessary. I have a, at this point, I don't have a strong preference. So I'll defer to other people and just go where needed.
Okay. I'll stay with accountability. I'm just trying to think about how much time this is gonna take. I'm just being real with y'all. I don't have a lot of time. Like I guess when we get these definitions too after this, that's what I'm concerned about. Like, is this gonna, is this gonna stay with like we're doing now, or we I'm struggling. I'm struggling with this because of my life.
So I put those 3 together just to so what I heard from people is if they're on the superintendent evaluation, they really only have a pile of work twice a year. But if you met a little more often, it wouldn't be as much work those 2 times a year. It would just be spread out over the year. That's what I heard. That's why I put them all together.
Yeah,
and also I think it doesn't always involve a meeting.
Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure it's not going to go too far. I just got to be honest. Like, I don't want to take on something and I can't keep it up. Okay.
And so you can put me on either committee. I see that policy already has 2, so I'm okay if I go back to fiscal responsibility. And I guess this leaves room so that if anyone or any policy or any committee feels that they need extra, hands or whatever, they can always ask. But I think based on what's up here, it looks like everyone is at least on one committee on one of our CCSD committees. And then with the standing community committees, are we gonna keep those the same with the same people? Or those people, y'all that are on those standing committees, do you want to trade out, or new people? Are any of these standing committees ones that you just like really been thinking about?
I'd like to nominate Nicole Holt for Envision Athens.
I will accept that nomination. I don't know if that's a part of the process, but thank you.
I was thinking too, if Mumbi wanted to do the early learning, which one is it? Given her interest
Early
in,
Head Start.
Yeah, the Early Head Start Policy Council. I mean, we can talk about it and you can decide whether you want it, but I thought that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Thanks, Kara.
Okay.
The committee I'm on, it's a 3-year term, but if someone's really dying to be on the community foundation, it's kind of structured, but I'm sure if it's another board member just really want to be on there, we could work it out, just let me know. I would, definitely would defer to, a new board member if they want an opportunity. So just let me know. I like being on there.
Sorry, can I nominate Karina for the Parent Advisory Board, given what she said about parents?
I'll do that.
And I think that would be something that would have to be decided, because I know like before we talked about one person attending the PAB meetings versus rotating.
Yeah, I like that rotating.
Yeah, so Karina, if that ends up being something that you feel or the board feels we need to have some rotation around or what have you, we can discuss that at any time in the future.
Okay.
I do have one question, Dr. Gant. In terms of the policy committee, like currently I'm working with, we're working on the J policy. So would that need to be a special, if I'm not on the policy committee after today, but we need to finish that work up, would that be a problem? Because we're almost done, but yeah.
Right. I would wonder, what the board thinks about, like finishing up the work that we're doing. And I don't know if, Dr. Thomas may be able to speak to this, because I know this also sort of reorganizes what we'll need, the staff needs for some of these committees. Right. But maybe if we can like identify just a date at which this will be effective, because it doesn't have to be effective tomorrow. And it probably can't be, simply because we got to go and be sure our policy is reflective of this. And so I would wonder if this is something that could be effective. I don't know either.
Let's say March
1st, and that'll give us time, maybe. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Thomas and board members?
That seems logical to me, especially in light of the fact that there has been a lot of work started that's nearing completion, and the time element to have to go back and, like teach someone else or give them that background on how where you are, how you got where you are, where you're trying to go, doesn't seem to be a good use of the time that you all have already put into it. And it's not an efficient way to complete those tasks. So I agree. And then you're right. That was one of the things Ms. Palmer and I have been sitting here talking about, trying to make sure we have appropriate cabinet level support for each of these committees to aid in the work that's going forward.
Okay, I take back my March. Should it be along the same year as the school year, the fiscal year? Would that be even better?
Yeah, what do you think would work for, because I know that you also have to take this back to the cabinet and like discuss to be sure that they will be able to meet dates. Meeting dates will also need to be, something that the committee comes up with, as well as their chairs and vice chairs. And so maybe we can say tentatively March,
Yeah,
I
let's,
think we can make the timeline work. I think is what's more important is for you all to tell us where you are with tasks that need to be completed, and what's reasonable for like some of these policies to be wrapped up, or that to me may be the biggest one in terms of having ongoing, like big chunks of work that are being completed. I'm trying to think if there's another one right now that would directly impact, and I don't think so, but please someone jump in and correct me. But I know that's the one where we've just been doing some really heavy lifting.
And if I need to stay on the policy, with that being said, I don't mind moving to policy, staying on there and finishing up, with Tish, either one, whichever makes sense, So I'm just thinking about the timeline.
What if we took the rest of the school year to get the policies guiding these committees in place and then implement?
Yeah, I like that.
At the end.
I like that. I like that. I feel better with that.
I don't think it'll take that long.
Yeah.
Well, you said 2 to 3 months. That's 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, the school year, Tish.
No, I think Tish was talking about,
the other policies?
No, I assumed you were talking, Tish, about like just updating the policies to reflect our changes.
Yeah. So if we need to change DBC to now have these 4 policies and their little blurb, that will take because it has to sit in the public review. It doesn't have to sit for public review for a month, but usually we do. And then in order for us to have a policy meeting, get the policy sort of written and then discussed in policy committee and then send it to the board, that's another at least month usually. So it's about 2 months minimum if we start today. So we could have it by the end of March, but we'd have to do it at the April 1st or, the meeting in April. I don't know that we could get it done by the March meeting. We could, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. Not if we went to public comment.
So why don't we have this as our new, these are our new committees. But right now, if you all are comfortable with functioning in the ways that we're functioning right now with our old committees until a specific date, be it March 1st, April 1st, or what have you, because at our last board meeting, we just said like we would serve on our same committees until, and right now until we've said March 1st, but it may need to go to April 1st or whatever. But I think we can just serve on our same committees, knowing that we're moving towards this direction, and that will give these new committees, a chance to not necessarily meet, but maybe talk to each other. Or come to policy and say, hey, Tish, as y'all are revising policy, as Kara said, this is what we think should be in our write-up. It just gives us some cushion.
Yeah, I agree.
Like it.
And in terms of the policy revision process, Dr. Gann and Dr. Maddox are the two that have been in charge of the I and the J policies. So we can still finish that work while you're either on the committee or a guest of the committee, however we want to do it.
Okay, so if what I hear, I'm sorry, hold on, I have an argument that's breaking out between children. Okay, so I think what I hear is that we have our old committees and assignments. We will serve in those roles until March 1st. Well, we will use March 1st or our first meeting in March to take like the temperature of where we are with policy, how far we've gotten with policy. But these are the new committees once we get everything worked out with policy, be that in March or be it in April. Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So I am going to move us forward. We are about 30 minutes behind schedule. So what that means is that we're going to have to adapt our schedule moving forward. We're going to have to decrease the time that we've set aside for our the conversation on school safety and then our community conversations as far as how we want to recognize individuals. Luckily, those conversations can be continued. So with school safety, it's more generally where we think we're going, how it ties into strategic plan, and with our community about how we recognize our community, that might not be ending work. So that may be starting, like things that we know we want to do. So I am going to recommend that we take about a 5-minute break. Is that okay? Or do you feel like you need a 10-minute break? Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. And I
Oh,
have,
sorry, Mommy did make she put in the chat, there's an open motion on the table, so don't we need to vote?
I'm not aware that we need to vote on the motion. I mean, I think maybe we could bring it to a work session as an update, and then business if we need to, but Dr. Thomas and anybody else who might be more familiar. I know we did have this conversation when we were planning for the retreat. I don't think
We don't vote on committees.
Okay.
So we don't vote on the changing of the structure of the committees? And it's fine. I just want to make sure we're doing everything accordingly.
So, yeah, we would vote on the policy, the BBC change. That will come to the board. And you can approve or disapprove that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and I thought we did I thought we did vote on committees.
We have
not in the past.
I thought the policy called for that, but okay, we can take a look. I'm fine. And we don't have to do it now. We would actually take that vote ultimately when we present this as the.
That's right. That's right. But historically, no, it's just been people choose. They choose, we take a work session and go up and everybody's like, yay, okay. That looks good. But yes, you're right. Policy, we will have to take a vote on. So let's take about a 5-minute break. It's 11.